Trust me, if you look it up, you'll see. I know that's the guy. Oh, you do?
Hi, George.
Hi,
I
Ernie.
am. We're on page 267 in volume 12.
Ernie, do you guys get the Tzurba easier? I already ordered 13, so I already have it.
Well, we could have given you, okay, Harold and Magda Katz sponsored it. So they
Oh.
were giving out, I would have gotten you one. But
Thank you.
But sometimes we order them for the group, and sometimes everyone just orders it on Amazon. I don't know what we're going to do for 14.
13, the only reason I was commenting was because there was very few. That's why I was going to ask you.
I have. Give me your address, George, and I'll send you.
Oh, no, I already got it. I got it.
Oh.
Thank
Now,
you so
Harold,
much, Harold.
I just told George that you and Magda had sponsored it and was giving it out to the Chevra, but
Yes.
George was concerned. So
Return that one, you get a free one.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope we get more people to listen.
you know,
Yes.
the director of this program, his name is Rabbi Doron Podlashek. He was in Los Angeles a week ago. I hosted him in my home. He had 7 appointments: Eula boys, Eula girls, Shalhevet, Maimonides, all the schools. They're all creating their own unique curricula. See, you around Tzurba, that means they can choose. Okay, I want tzitzis, tefillin, Kriya Shema. You know, and they can create their own volume for the school for 8th grade, for 7th grade, and they're doing that.
You know what I think is the most fascinating thing is that it's the halachas for all the different nusachs, which I think is fabulous.
Right, Sephardi and
It's
Ashkenaz.
fabulous. You know, coming out of Guatemala, my big argument has always been that we're too few to always keep thinking still. I mean, when the Jews first got to Guatemala, you know, the Sephardim stuck with the Sephardim, the Ashkenaz stuck with the Ashkenaz. And I really think that it was the beginning of why we ended up with so much
I think
intermarriage.
you're very right. I think the fact that we get an appreciation. What
We
is
understand
we see
better
Ovadia
something.
Yosef, we see
Yes.
what is their halacha, what is our halacha, and it's really one, and you see how it flowed from the same source, and there was some difference in how they interpreted it or whatever, but it creates an achdus. I agree with you.
Yep. And you know what? If I go to daven in a shul that's Nusach Ashkenaz or Nusach Sfard, I know what you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
you know where the information is.
Yeah, very well put. So here's Walter. I don't see Yaakov. Okay, I don't see Sai. Okay, it's 267. Huh?
Yeah.
So the Torah contains numerous different subjects and components. We're learning about the halachas of learning Torah, and not only that, but setting a specific time every day to learn. So this chapter is titled, "What parts of Torah should one learn?" We know there's Chumash, there's Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha. Are there any guidelines as to what to learn and how to do it? The Gemara in Kiddushin addresses this question in the following manner. This is Masechta Kiddushin, Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. La'olam yishalish adam shnoisa. A person should divide his years into 3. Shlish b'mikra, a third in Chumash, or Bible, let's just say Tanakh. Shlish b'mishnah, a third in Mishnayos. Shlish b'talmud, the Gemara that explains the Mishnah. Mi yodea kama chai. So the Gemara says, what do you mean divide? So the first 20 years of your life, you're going to learn X. And then the next 20, you're going to learn Y. The next 20, you're going to learn Z. Person doesn't know how long he's going to live. He's going to end up missing a huge part of Torah. So that's why the Gemara said, no. Right? The Gemara asked, Mi yodea kama chai? How can you do that? Person doesn't know how long he's going to live. Lo tzrich, the answer is lo yoimi. Means you divide up your Torah learning on a daily basis into 1/3 Tanakh, 1/3 Mishnah, 1/3 Gemara. Now, the Rishonim disputed how to understand this Gemara. According to Rashi, it means that one should divide up the days of the week with regard to what studies. L'yomi yimei hashvua. So Rashi doesn't say every day you should divide it up. 2 days out of the week you do this, 2 days out of the week you do this, 2 days, and then Shabbos you maybe do a trifecta, whatever. But you divide up your week that way. Tosfos rejected Rashi, as the Gemara's question would still not be answered. Although one usually assumes that he will live until the end of the week, that's not always certain. Tosfos therefore suggests that the Gemara refers to dividing up one's learning time each day. However, Rabbeinu Tam posits, that's Rashi's grandson, posits that a person may fulfill his obligation to study all three aspects by studying Gemara, since it includes element of all three. Now, why didn't the Gemara, the footnote says the reason the Gemara itself did not offer this option, because the Gemara was not yet written down when Rashi and Tosfos were operating. Rashi is the year about 1000. Tosfos is the next couple hundred years. The first Talmud wasn't printed until early 1500s. So there was no printed Talmud yet. And did not appear as it does in its current form. Okay? And we know many Gemaras has psukim in there. Of course, there's a Mishnayos in many Gemaras. So you're doing all three. Tosfos there in Kiddushin, Lo Tzricha L'Yomi, Perish HaKuntris, the Rashi had explained, Yimei HaShabbos, divided up a couple, days of the week. Kloimar, Shnei Yomim Mikra, Shnei Yomim Mishnah, Shnei Yomim Gemara. V'lo Nehira, says Tosfos, that's not clear. The Imken Hakati Avi Motzi L'Mivrich Miyada Kamacha, you still have the question, who knows if the person is going to live out the week? So V'nirli Lefarish. So it seems to me to explain B'chol Yom V'Yom Atzmo Yishalish. You should divide up every day into thirds. Alkein Tikin B'Sefer B'Seder Rav Amram Gon. Rav Amram had a siddur, and Rav Amram gave a certain seder of your day. He was misakein that's the kind of learning you should do. It looks like they were already doing korbanos, right? They were learning, psukim. Then they had Abaya, Aliba the Gemara. They brought the Gemara, Ton Rabbanon, Peter Baktoires. Already in the Siddur of Amram, they have the Seder korbanos. Loimer Mikra Mishnah Gemara. Rabbeinu Tam Pirish. Sha'anu Soimchim Ahad Rabbeinu v'Sanhedrin. Why is Talmud Bavel called Bavel? Blula b'mikra b'mishnah v'gemara. It's mixed up. The word balul is like you mix it up, like a mincha blula. That you take flour and oil, you mix it. So it's a mixture of psukim, mishnah, and gemara. The Gemara's Bavel, balul mikulam. The Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, was a mixture of all three sort of divisions. Now, the Rambam had his own interpretation of the Gemara. What did it mean to divide things up in three? The Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah says, Chayiv l'shalish is man l'midaso, shlish b'torah b'chsav, a third in the written Torah, ushlish b'torah shebal peh, a third in Torah shebal peh, ushlish yavin v'yaskil achris davar mereshiso. This is like he's saying how to derive principles, the Yotzi Davar Midovar, how to become a thinker, how to extract knowledge from one subject to another, the Yidmeh Davar L'Davar, how to make analogies, the Yavin B'midos Shator Nitzreshes Behem. Think about Kal Vachomer and Klal Prat and the various attributes that the Torah is studied. Ad she'eda hechu ikra midos. until he understands how those principles operate. And therefore, he'll be able to derive halacha, what's prohibited, what's permitted. That which he learned from Mesoret, from tradition handed it down from his Rebbe. The Inyan Zeh Nikra Gemara. The Rambam has defined for us what really means Gemara. Okay, Ketzad. The Rambam wants to tell us practically how to do this. Hayabal Umnis. He's a craftsman. He's a carpenter. Vaya oisik b'malachto shalosh shoyz b'yom u'v'torah tesha. And he went to work for 3 hours, and he studied Torah for 9 hours. So from this little flippant comment of the Rambam, you see what our lives are supposed to be. Yeah, you're supposed to go and work, but it's not supposed to be 9 hours of work and 3 hours of Torah. It's supposed to be the opposite. Osana Tesha, those 9 hours, Korei b'shalosh mehen b'Torah sheb'chsav. He should learn Tanakh, Chumash, Rashi, Meforshim, Uv'shalosh b'Torah sheb'al peh, 3 hours of Mishnah, Uv'shalosh acheres mizborim b'daitul havin davar mitova. He has to think how to learn, extract one piece of knowledge from another. Divrei Kabbalah, bichlal Torah sheb'chsavein, and the he says Divrei Kabbalah, which is Tanakh, that's part of Torah sheb'chsav. Uperushim bichlal Torah sheb'al peh. Now, learning a Radak or an Abarbanel, because they mainly bring Chazal to explain the psukim, that's considered Torah sheb'al peh. V'haninyonim anikroim pardes bichlal ha'gemara. Pardes is pshat, remez, drash, and sod. That's like Kabbalah. I mean, pshat is basic pshat, but basically the other three, remez, drash, and sod, are more Kabbalistic. Let's continue in the Rambam. This is all in the beginning stages of a person. But as he grows in his wisdom, he knows Torah Sheb'chsav very well. He doesn't even have to occupy himself too much with Torah Sheb'al Peh. Yikra be'itim uzumanim Torah Sheb'chsav. He should read occasionally Torah Sheb'chsav. V'divrei Hashmo kedei shelo yishkach davar medivrei dinei Torah. Otherwise, he'll forget. But he should focus. V'yifneh kol yomav l'gemar bilvad. He should spend most of his time on the difficult subjects that he explained. L'fi rochav sheyesh b'libo v'yishav daito, based on his ability.
It's interesting because when you study his life, it was crazy. He worked not only, obviously not pertinent to tonight, but he spent so much of his time because he was usually the doctor to the very powerful, because he was the kings and the queens, or the
Sultan.
Yeah, but then he also donated a huge amount of his time to the poor.
There are letters. The Igros Arab says he would come home at night.
Correct.
And at 9 o'clock at night, the people in the community would come
To see him.
for medical visitations at that time.
He slept
After his whole day.
a couple of hours a day.
So when did he write the Yad HaChazaka?
When he was there, and he was being transported from Furstad to Cairo with the Sultan. He would be involved in learning. An hour to get there.
He just didn't waste time. So Tosfos, I just want to read the footnote 8. Tosfos referred to the passages that we find in the Korbanot prior to Pezukei de Zimra. That's the Parshas HaTamid, Ezer Makomam, and Rabbi Shmuel Omer. The first Parshas HaTamid is the passage describing the mitzvah of the daily offering, which was instituted to recite daily. The second is the 5th chapter of Mishnah Masechta Zvachim. And the third was the listing of the hermeneutical principles of Rabbi Shmuel. So we see that this was established, that therefore you had psukim from the Torah, from Mishnah, and from Midrash, which is Gemara. So the Korbanot section was established by Rav Amram Gaon to fulfill this Gemara. So let's go back to 269. According to the Rambam, the term Gemara doesn't refer to the Talmud, as the Rambam interprets the term Mishnah to include the interpretation of the Mishnah, i.e. Gemara as well. Rather, the Rambam understands the term Gemara to refer to an analysis of the sources, which was limud be'iyun, in-depth learning. In essence, the method of study that Rambam refers to as Gemara is actually what the Talmud itself does in analyzing the Mishnah. Thus, the Rambam understood that we should use the same analytical approach in studying the Talmud as the Talmud itself uses in analyzing the Mishnah. According to this approach of the Rambam, which is different from Rashi and Tosfos, one should divide one's time for learning between Tanakh, Mishnah, Gemara, and analysis iyun of the Gemara. The Rambam, though, limits the scope of this division as applying for only a part of a person's life. After a person has already studied large portions of the Torah, he should spend most of his time studying Gemara, i.e., studying Talmud analytically with the iyun method. Where did the Rambam get this? What is the source for the Rambam's ruling? The Gemara never introduces any distinction between a person's early years of learning and his later years. The Lechem Mishnah, which is an important commentary on the Rambam, writes that the Rambam felt this distinction as a logical one that explains the common practice to focus our Torah study on Gemara, despite the Gemara's own ruling to divide one's learning time equal into 3. The Lechem Mishnah says, Zeh kosav Rabbeinu, lateit smach she'enanu nogim ela b'Talmud. The Lechem Mishnah said the Rambam was being melamed zchus to those of us now, even in the Lechem Mishnah's generation, that basically spend most of their time learning Gemara. L'zeh amar misvar denafshe. So he said his own personal svara. B'medvar amur b'tchilas limudah. So how did the Shulchan Aruch eventually paskin? Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam nearly word for word, while the Ramah cites the opinion of Tosfos.
Did you tell us that the Shulchan Aruch took from 3 sources, the Rush,
The Rif, and the Rambam? Usually, so if there was a debate, okay, but we know the Marana Beis Yosef of the Sfardi, who relied very heavily on the Rambam, but not always. So there was a machlokas in halacha. Bernie asked, we had said once before that when Rav Yosef Karo paskin in the Shulchan Aruch, he oftentimes took a vote between the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh, who were 3 earlier Rishonim. And it very much is like that. If there was a machlokas and it was 2 out of 3, so he paskined like 2 out of 3. Perhaps here the Rif and the Rosh didn't make a comment. They didn't always make a comment on everything. The Rosh in halacha you find in the back of each Gemara. Look at the back of every Talmud Bavli. You'll see the Piskei Rosh, and the Rosh summarizes every Gemara and gives halacha, but doesn't comment on everything. The Rif the same thing. The Rif also. So the Rambam sometimes commented on things or gave you a halacha direction which you didn't have in the Rif and the Rosh. So it's not always that they had 3 opinions on every subject matter. So sometimes he just followed the Rambam because maybe Rambam was the only one who had said something on it.
Ernie,
Yes.
but surely I see most of the Sfardim, they say that they learn everything in the morning. There's a certain every day. There's a yom. Forgot what it's called.
They have a Seder Ayom. They have a Seder Ayom.
Yeah, no, it's called. I can look it up. I don't know what's called. Where they learn. The Torah, they learn the Psukim, and then they learn a Mishnah, and then
There's some the Hasidim is called Chok. So if you go into the Chassidish Shtibel,
but also by the Sfardim.
I know Barry White. It's called Chok, and he learns it every day. It's a compilation of Psukim, Gemara, Zohar.
Yeah, but that's by the Sfardim. They learn that also.
Maybe the Sephardim learn Chok too. Maybe. Okay. So let's see this Yoredeya, Reish Mem Vav, because remember, when we went through Yoredeya, we learned Hilchos Talmud Torah. We went through this. So he quotes the Rambam. You have to divide it into three. And he quotes the Rambam when he's young. Word for word for the Rambam. Says the Ramah, Yesh Oimrim, he's referring to Tosfos. Shebetalmud Bavli Shehu Balu B'Mikra, that was Rabbeinu Tam. B'Mishnah V'Gemara, Adam Yotzei Dechavosu B'Shvil HaKol. So the Litvisher approach was to follow the Ramah. And that's why in the Lithuanian yeshivas, the primary approach was to study Talmud Bavli. Now, if one were to follow the Shulchan Aruch entirely, it would seem that during the formative years of learning, one would spend 1/3 of one's time on Tanakh, 1/3 on Mishnah and Gemara, studied more quickly Kiyus, and 1/3 Iyun. The Rama would say that one not need to spend so much time studying Tanakh or Mishnah, but can learn Gemara alone. Should one choose, as it includes everything. Although these models are often not followed completely today, the Psakim Utshuvos on Yoredeya notes, in the name of many Achronim, that based on these opinions, it is common today for yeshivot to spend one learning period, Seder, on Iyun style Gemara learning, and another on Bekiyas. What about the study of halacha? Should one make time to study halacha as well? And what should one who is working do if he cannot devote his entire day to Torah study? Should he focus more on halacha so as to know how to follow the mitzvahs properly? The Taz and Shach, those are the main commentators on Yoredeya Shulchan Aruch, both write that despite the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah, one who does not learn Torah full time should spend most of one's time studying halacha rather than Gemara. Says the Taz, Kosov B'Drisha. Drisha is a mefarish on the tour. Yesh bali batim noagim l'mod b'chol yom Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos. V'lo shar poskim, but not other poskim. The Raya Tamisof Nida, their proof is from the end of Masechta Nida, Tanav Elio, Kol Hashona Halachos B'chol Yom Muftach Lo, that they need to know halacha, because if you study halacha, you're guaranteed the world to come. Avali Nira the Tzarech Lasok B'Sifrei HaPoskim, Kigon Al-Fasi, that's the Rif, the Mordechai, who's another Rishon on the back of the Gemaras that brings you halacha psuka. Ashri is the Rosh, the Domeim. The Einam Yotzim Klal B'Limud Gemara, Perish Rashi v'Tosfos l'chud. And they're not Yotze just learning Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, because they're lacking the halacha. Ya'id Tanit Ve'Eliyah Kol Lashon Halachos Perish Rashi Hilchos Psukos, meaning halacha that's been paskin by a posek ad kan lashon. Umasha kosav Rabbeinu Tam kan Shas Bavli is Bavli Bolu, this mixed up thing that Talmud Bavli is mixed up with psukim and everything else. That's koya masha kosav livnezim. He's saying that goes on what was written right before there, meaning alimu tesha shos b'yom. Somebody was learning 9 hours a day. The kifin sheyesh lo pnai gadol yilamed b'shas. So Enochanami, Rabbeinu Tam was saying, if he has a lot of time to learn, he should learn Shas. But our householders who go to work, they learn 3 or 4 hours a day. They shouldn't just learn Gemara, they should learn the other. In our day, the poskim are Igros Moshe, Mishnah Brura, the Abi Omer. In their day, in the Taz's day, it was the Mordechai, the Rif, the Rosh, etc. According to the Taz. Even studying a page of Gemara with commentary of Rashi and Tosfos is not ideal for one who is working. In addition, the comment of Rabbeinu Tam discussed above of fulfilling one's obligations to study Tanakh, Mishnah, and Gemara through learning Gemara does not apply to one who is not spending the bulk of his days on Torah study. Rather, such a person should spend his time primarily studying works on Allah. And by the way, just tooting the horn of Tzurba, when you learn other Sifrei Halacha, like Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, so there you just have halacha, halacha, halacha. But you learn Tzurba, he gives you the whole thing. They usually start off with the Psukim, you then read the Gemara, you go through the pilpul of the Rishonim, and then you find out what the final halacha is. So in essence, it's learning halacha with a combination of all three.
Yeah, that's the way
He brings it. In addition to focusing on halacha, many authorities also discuss the disadvantages of spending an inordinate amount of time on pilpul, an analytical method known as splitting hairs. Although developing this skill and sharpening one's intellect is certainly important, and yeshiva students do often spend a large amount of time on it, for those who do not learn all day, it seems that it is unwise to focus on this. For example, the Maharal sharply critiques those who spend too much time on pilpul. In addition, the Gra is recorded as having commanded his students to focus on studying 2 pages of Gemara a day with Rashi and reviewing it, as well as studying the Shulchan Aruch, Aruch Chaim. The Yalkut Yosef, right, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the son of Rav Ovadia, also writes that those with limited time for Torah study should focus on learning practical halacha. Balabatim shenim londim b'chol yom, elegimel adal shos b'vad. Balabatim who learn only 3 or 4 hours a day. Yilmadu halachos b'sifra poskim. They should learn halachos from the poskim asher mipiyim anu chayim. V'einem yoytzim b'dei choyvasim b'limud mishnah gemara b'vad. They are not fulfilling their obligation of learning Torah with just studying Mishnah and Gemara. She'ein l'meinim halacha v'pi Talmud. You can't learn strict halacha from just studying Gemara. Now, the Balatanya, Rav Shneur Zalman Liadi, also addresses this question in the Shulchan Aruch Hara. He suggests spending most of one's Torah time studying halacha by learning some of the background sources and underlying reasoning, and not only the practical bottom line, though he must make sure to study other subjects as well. Ach adam kazeh, he talks about a balabayit who's not learning all day. He says he doesn't have a lot of time. His study should be study that's going to bring good action. The halachas you have to know to know how to do things correctly. And the person shouldn't slip in violating negative prohibitions. You don't always have the posuk ha'ir in front of you to know what to do. So you have to study. You won't even know what to ask if you don't have the rudiments at your fingertips. He says the majority of Orach Chaim, that's the chelik we're learning now in Shulchan Aruch. He says the majority of Orach Chaim, umiut yoredeya, the minority of yoredeya, and uma'at, very little, the Eva Ezra Choshna Mishpat, kol halacha brua b'taimim and atam ufarsha. You should learn every halacha clearly with its reasoning. Gemara Rosh Beis Yosef Lefachos. He says at least the Beis Yosef, the main commentary on the Torah, because the Beis Yosef always brings you the Gemaras and he shows you how the halacha developed. The lachzor alein lo, you should always be chayzer them. The gam misha dai to yafeh. and someone who has a good memory, he can remember all of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Those should be the first things he should commit to memory. Din kadima, in establishing a precedence of what you should learn first. That comes first. These are things that come up very rarely, and you should learn the relevant things first. The limud ha'agadis maybe gam lidei ma'aser. Agadita, which is non-halachic. Why should we learn that? Because it brings you to do ma'aser. To learn various musar from those agadita. The way he's going to explain. He should read like Mesilas Yesharim, other books of Musar, Nivnu Divrei al Midrashim v'Agadis, that were built on the Midrashim and the Agadis and the Zohar. All of this milvada kriya b'Tanakh li timuzmanim. He says you should learn Tanakh at set times. He says learning Tanakh takes precedence over all else. That's what he says. It means li'itim mizumani. You should set aside time to learn Tanakh. Takes precedence over all else. Okay.
Ernie,
Yes.
also, we're talking about adults, but if you go back to the basic education as when we were young, there's a thing called the Maral track. One of my grandchildren in Toronto, the young kids were just learning Chumash and laning the whole parsha, because the emphasis was that of just learning Chumash for so many years. And that, even the Gemara sometimes says, it wonders why some Amoira didn't mention, oh, don't you remember that pasuk? You know, the basic is the Chumash. And so they have this Maral track where I don't know for how many years, they learn how to lane and every parsha from beginning to end, the whole Torah for so many years. And that puts a foundation for everything else later on.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I had become a Balkora very quickly, right after my bar mitzvah. So I laned in Rambam, George might remember, in Minyan. And the Rebbeim, Rabbi Gruman, one of would always, Melech, what pasuk? It means they would always refer to the Balkoire to remember a pasuk. If we were learning a Gemara and he wanted to know a pasuk, so the Balkoires would remember Sukkim because they laid it over and over and over again. And it does help you in Bikiyas of remembering Psukim in different places. So the fact that that was not what you're describing was not a typical educational format, but I could see the value in that. As a Balkara, I could see the value in teaching a whole class how to lane, and they lane all the Psukim, and then they become very familiar with when Psukim are quoted throughout the Gemara, they know exactly where it's from. Okay. Page 273.
Ernie, before you go forward,
Yes.
how do you see what we do now with the Daf Yomi fitting? Because the Daf Yomi is a relatively recent development. And yet, in terms of history, we have the largest number of people learning Gemara that there has ever been.
That's true. So the Rabbi Meir Shapiro in 1920, with the blessing of the Chafetz Chaim, introduced the idea to the Knesiyah Gdolah. They had an annual convention, and he introduced the idea there. And Chafetz Chaim gave it a bracha. And you're absolutely right, George. There's never been, more Gemara learning by the average people since they established Daf Yomi. Now, what's nice about the Daf Yomi is we learned a few weeks ago that you want to have a learning every day, right? We learned Tzurba once a week, but the halacha was a person should set aside time in his day to learn. So people fulfill it by some of these things in shul, by the korbanos that you read every day, technically. But now the fact that people sit every day for a half hour, an hour, and learn a blot Gemara, which we've learned tonight based on the Ramah, that's the best learning you could do. So look at how many people are fulfilling the mitzvah of Kviyas Itim L'Torah. They're learning the right thing through the daf, the daf yomi. Now, again, the daf yomi is a learning. We could spend 2-3 hours on every daf going to EU and figuring out the halach and everything like that. But it doesn't detract from the tremendous value of the daf yomi to the group of people who learn it every day. They have a Kviyas Itim L'Torah every day, and they're learning the thing that the Ramah recommended you to learn. And you're right, Joe. It's only 100 years that the world has been doing daf yomi.
Yep. I think it's interesting.
Now, what should working individuals learn? What's the practical halach? The Mishnah Berurah accepts the suggestions of the Taz, Shach, and Shulchan Aruch Harav and suggests that working individuals should learn a large amount of halach as well. What does he call Torah B'chsav? Tanakh, and then Mishnah Gemara Uposkim, and Mishnah Gemara and Poskim Ubali Batim. Sheinam Landim Ragimel Dalet Shos B'Yom, who learn 3 or 4 hours a day. Lo Yilmadu B'Gemara L'Chud, they shouldn't just learn Gemara. De Bezein Yotzei, he's not going to fulfill his obligation. You should bring it down to practical halacha, each one according to his ability. We are, however, left with a major difficulty. Many of the sources we have seen appear to describe an ideal program of Torah study for those who study in yeshiva, at least part-time. But unfortunately, due to today's modern lifestyle, most people are unable to set aside even the, quote, 3 or 4 hours mentioned by the Mishnah Berurah for Torah learning for working people, which was apparently the average amount studied by some in his time. Today, many of those working would likely place themselves closer to the Mishnah Berurah's categorization of extenuating circumstances in source 17 above. He said that over there, that was on page 265. He recommended that people study after the morning tefillah and then go to the business. So back to 273.
Ernie,
Yes.
yeah, just to let you know, so in Balech Chavaderech, they've got all the different things that you should learn every day. So it starts off with Limud Yoimi Automati. In other words, it talks about automatically what you should learn every day. It starts off with Daf Yoimi, Chok Yisrael, Chida Yoimi, Tehillim Shvui, with Tehillim Chodshi. That's the way that breaks it down.
Okay. So they mentioned the chok.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're back to most people would place themselves in a category of extenuating circumstances in which learning only a very small amount is permissible. How should one who is limited in the time available for Torah study divide his time, and what should he learn? One option is to join a program, such as Daf Yomi or Mishnah Yomi, which are attractive due to the clearly defined nature of the program. It allows participants wide exposure to Talmudic literature. Like George said, such programs have become enormously popular in recent years and are certainly wonderful ways to ensure that one studies Torah daily. Rav Simcha Rabinovich, who is the author of the Piskei Teshuvos, offers another alternative based upon the sources above. He suggests that one dedicate most of one's Torah study time to practical halach. Af bizmanenu Muatima balibatim shmagdishim gimel v'dal shoshim min haTorah. He says that there's very few balibatim that devote 3 or 4 hours a day. Mikol mokom einhem pturim. Mikol alimudim aniskar. They're not patur from the various regimens that were described by the people we've learned. V'yesh lam lachalik et itutam. They should divide up their time. Shemagdishim l'Torah, bishvil lilmod Tanakh, Mishnayos Gemara. V'ikra azman yasku b'halacha sheb'chol yom. Leida eich linagal b'Torah v'limud sifrei musar. He says the most time should be spent on practical halacha for day-to-day use. And you should not forget sifrei musar. Based upon the suggestions given by the Achronim for studying practical halacha, Rav Yaakov Ariel, he was the chief rabbi of Ramat Gan for 20 years. One of the most important Mizrahi poskim over the last 30 years. He's almost be chief rabbi. Recommends if one has extremely limited time for Torah study each week, one should attend a Tzurba M'Rabanan shir, as this provides a person with the basis for the halacha, as well as with many of the practical conclusions. This is a Rav Yaakov Yirah from the Hebrew Tzurba. Im yesh mishu tzarech livchor rak shir echad b'shavua, habchira nechona ladati ashir shel Tzurba M'Rabanan. What a plug!
That's why this is the last comment in this section.
What about women? What about women in Talmud Torah? Our discussion of the obligation of Talmud Torah is focused primarily on men. Men have an obligation to study Torah. Women don't have a mitzvah saseh to study Torah. Now, we learned that women do have an obligation to study those halachos that apply to them. There's a chiyuv for them. So what is the halacha, though, with regard to women? Are they obligated to study Torah in any form? And if so, is it any different than the obligation of men? Are they even permitted to study Torah? And has the answer to this question changed over time? In this section, we will briefly survey some of the major classical sources and contemporary opinions about this important issue. The Gemara in Kiddushin explains that women are not obligated in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah as are men. This is Masechta Kiddushin Chav Tes Amud Beis. Where is the source that women are not chayav? Ichsiv v'limadatem ulamadatem. You shall teach and you shall learn. Kol shemitzuva lilmod, mitzuva lelamed. Whoever is commanded to study Torah is commanded to teach. Because she'ena mitzuva lilmod, whoever is not commanded to study, eina mitzuva lelamed, is not commanded to teach. Okay. Ihi minolan d'lo machayva l'meilef nafshi. Okay. Where is the source that they don't have to learn? Dichsiv v'limadatem ulamadatam. Kol sha'acherim mitzuvim l'lamdo. If other people have to teach him, mitzuvah l'lamed es atzmo. He has to teach himself. Kol she'ein acherim mitzuvah l'lamdo. If you're such a person that other people don't have to teach, and mitzuvah l'lamed, he doesn't have to teach himself. U'minayin she'ein acherim mitzuvah l'lamdo. Where do we see that nobody is obligated to teach a woman? The Amar Krav Limadatem Osam es bneichem v'lo es bnoseichem. A man is supposed to teach his son Torah, but not his daughter. So since there's no chiyuv to teach, there's no chiyuv for them to teach themselves. According to Gemara, we derive from the series of interpretations quoted that since others are not obligated to teach women Torah, due to the term your sons, consequently they are not obligated to study Torah themselves, and are therefore not obligated either to teach their children. It would seem at first glance that although women are not obligated to study Torah, it is still permitted for them to do so. Like any other mitzvah in the Torah, from which women are exempt, but may fulfill should they so desire, such as time-bound mitzvahs, such as hearing the shofar, shaking the lulav, sitting in a sukkah. We know that women are potter for mitzvahs sasei man grama, but that they are allowed to, if they want to do it, and to make a bracha on it. Now, you know, Sfardim don't hold of that. Sephardic women do not make a bracha on mitzvahs that they choose to do. Only Ashkenazim do. However, there's an additional passage in the Mishnah Sota that complicates the picture. The Mishnah is discussing the Sota. A married woman, by the way, we're referencing the Daf Yomi, we're about to start Masechta Sota on Friday. We're finishing Nazir in the next couple of days, and we're going to start a new Talmud. Very interesting Gemara, Masechta Sota. A married woman who is suspected by her husband of committing adultery and is brought to the Beis HaMikdash to undergo the special ceremony as described in the Torah. Although the Torah states that if she is guilty, the Sota waters mentioned there will cause her to die, the Mishnah notes that there are exceptional cases and then cites a dispute that is relevant to our issue. Mishnah. Im yesh laschos, isotolala. Meaning, the way this worked was, if a husband was suspicious of his wife with a certain man, he would warn her, I don't want you to sequester yourself in a private room with such and such man. And he had to warn her in front of two Eidim. Okay, that's step one. Then two Eidim had to see her go into her room alone with that man. The two Eidim don't see what goes on in that room. If there were Eidim that actually saw an act of adultery go on, an act of cohabitation, so they would come to Beis Din, they would report what they saw, and the two people would be put to death if there were Eidim and Asra. Because if there's Eidim that they actually saw an act of cohabitation, so that's not a case of Sota. Case of Sota is we don't know what happened in that room. It's a suffix. Maybe they had relations, maybe they didn't. But at that point, if there were Eidim given to her that she shouldn't sequester, and then there are Eidim that see that they went inside a room alone, so at that point, the husband may not live with his wife anymore until he takes her up to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, and they dissolve a parsha in water, and she has to drink the water. And then if she was innocent, she would stay alive. And not only that, she would have a baby boy would be born, would be a schus for her. And if in that room she had committed adultery and she went ahead and drank the water, her stomach would explode and all that. Most women, if they had done that, would not have drunk the water. What would happen? They would accept a divorce by their husband and go out without a ksuba. So they lose their ksuba if you commit adultery. So that's how this process works. So this mistress says that even if she had committed adultery, if she had other zechuyos, she gave a lot of tzedakah, or whatever other merits she had. Haisatolala, she wouldn't die immediately from the water. She would be suspended. Tola. Yesh chus tola shana achas. Yesh chus tola. Is that Esti?
I know we never finalized that.
Sorry.
No, is Esti? I figured I was going to say Esti's probably going to join us on this section of women learning Torah. Was Walter? Has she been involved in this, or that was just Esti talking? No, I thought she was commenting on something I had said. No, okay. Yesh chus tola beishanim. Yeschos Tola Gimel Shanim. So there are merits that a woman wouldn't die right away if she drank the water. She might stay alive 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on her merits. Mikano Reben Azai, Chai Vadim L'Lamed is Bito Torah. She'im Tishte, Teda Sheschus Toila. She'd be learned enough to know that if she went to drink the water and she had merits, she wouldn't die right away. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, just the opposite. Whoever teaches her Torah is teaching her promiscuity. The problem, what is he saying by that? If a woman learns this din, she'll go ahead and commit adultery because she knows she can get away with it. So that's why chas v'sholom we shouldn't teach our women Torah. Because if they know that they have skuyos that could protect them, it's going to cause them to be more promiscuous. That's the way Rabbi Eliezer. Regarding what? Which part don't you like?
1 year, 2 years, or 3 years.
What part are you saying shoot you on? What don't you like here?
That teaching women causes promiscuity.
I just explained why the Gemara said that.
So what is the big difference teaching of man, the same thing, doesn't teach.
Because a man isn't taken, the man doesn't have this process of if there's a suspicion of promiscuity, she has to drink this water. Here, what he's saying is if they learn this halacha that merits protect her, they're going to go ahead and be more promiscuous because they know they're not going to die if they drink the sota waters because merits will protect them. By the way, I never understood it either. Why it meant? Why did Rabbi Yehuda say it teaches them promiscuity? This is why. This is it.
And
Because they'll be promiscuous.
stories don't teach men all these kinds of things that they think they can do.
We've got Susie up in an arms here. She says all the things that the men learn when they study Gemara doesn't rile them up either. There's a lot of very provocative things in the Gemara. Yeah, but we don't have a sota process. So it's just a different thing. This is based on this thing where it protects you from when you drink the water. That's all.
And if I was you, I would, with Susie, I would quit while I was ahead. Don't watch out. She's a lawyer.
Walter just said, quit. When it comes to Susie, quit while you're ahead. Okay. Freit the Gemara, Tiflu Sakadaitach? What does it mean? What did Rabbi Eliezer mean that if they're going to teach them Torah, it's going to teach them promiscuity? Ema, Ki'ilu Lamda Tiflus. It's as if they taught them to be promiscuous. Aravo my time Rabbi Lo Dechsiv, Ani Chochma Shochanti Arma. I am wisdom. I dwell with people who are cunning. Once a person has some wisdom, they'll be cunning. And the more wisdom a woman learns, she'll be more cunning in her potential adulterous behavior. It seems that the dispute between the Tanoim cited in the Mishnah concerning whether one should teach his daughter Torah revolves around considerations specific to the sota. Whether it is preferable to know that she has merit to delay her punishment, or is it preferable to not allow her the opportunity to use Torah wisdom inappropriately? However, it seems that many Rishonim understood the dispute as a more global one as well. The Rambam rules in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer and understands it as a general directive against teaching one's daughter Torah. In addition, the Rambam also cites the first passage from Kiddushin that women are exempt from the mitzvah and adds that they still receive reward for performing an optional mitzvah. A woman who learns Torah, says the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah, they get reward. It's not on the same level of a man. Why? They weren't commanded. We know that a person who's commanded to do something and does it gets a higher reward. A person who does something and they're not commanded to do it doesn't get the same reward. Now, even though there's reward, Savu Chachamim shelo yilmod adam es bita Torah. The Chachamim declared that a man should not teach his daughter Torah. Mipnei sherov anoshim ein daita mechuvanois liislamed. So that's a controversial statement. It says that they can't concentrate their attention on study. Vein motzias divrei Torah divrei havoy, and they become like non-meaningful words because of their lack of understanding. It should be noted that Rambam understands the term tiflut different than Rashi. According to Rashi, the concern of tiflut is promiscuity, while for the Rambam it's just idleness. So it's going to lead them to idleness because they're going to be learning something and it doesn't have any practical use for them. That's the oral Torah. You shouldn't study Torah shebechsav l'chatchila. But if you teach Tanakh, Torah shebechsav, then it's not teaching idle things. So the Rambam preferenced learning Tanakh for women. It seems the Rambam understood the strict halacha to be that it is permitted for women to study Torah, but in practice it's not advisable, both with regard to Tanakh, but it's not tiflus, as well as the oral Torah, which is tiflus. And the Shulchan Aruch used the same language. According to the sources we have seen so far, it would seem that in most cases, women are exempt from the mitzvah of Talmud Torah and should not be taught Torah either. However, this is difficult to understand, as there are sources which indicate that women do have an obligation to study certain areas of Torah. According to Shulchan Aruch, women must recite Birchas Torah, the brachos and Torah story recited every morning. Noshim avachos Birchas Torah. According to Bir Halacha, the Chavetz Chaim, one of the reasons for this practice is that women are indeed obligated to study halachas that pertain to them. Other answers given include that they must recite the sections of Korbanos and Tefillah, which are considered Torah study, or they were reciting the bracha only because men are commanded in the mitzvah. The Beis HaLevi, the first Soloveitchik, explains that although women are not obligated in Torah study for its own sake, in the first part of this piece, not quoted here, the Beis HaLevi develops the idea that the mitzvah of Torah study contains two elements: study for its own sake, lishma, and study for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvahs. So v'gam hanoshim she'enon mechuyaves b'limud haTorah mikol makom mechuyaves lilmod b'mitzvahs noeges behem. So the Beis HaLevi, already in the middle of the 19th century, said that women have to study Torah that apply to them. Beis Yosef Simin Mem Zayin b'Shem HaRokeach. That's why they make a blessing on the Torah in the morning. On the Banashim yesh od mala achas al nashim. Men have another element of limud Torah. The nashim b'limud ein makayim shum mitzvah saseh. There's no mitzvah saseh. Rakavim mavo l'kiyum mitzvahs. They have to know basar b'cholav. They have to know nida. So learning is an avenue by which they're makayim other mitzvahs. But it's not an own independent mitzvah by studying. Nimtza dalimud etzlam having mavo. It's like a preface. La tachlis shus kima mitzvahs. V'lovli tachlis batzmo. Their learning is not its own tachlis, where you get a mitzvah. Avol ba'anoshim havalimud ga mitzvahs aseilatz. You know what? We have a fair amount to finish. I don't want to rush through this. It's late. Okay, now, just some housekeeping. Next week is B'dikas Chametz. People are traveling already, they're out of town. I recommend that we go on hiatus for 2 weeks. That means next week, Erev Pesach, and then the following week, which is within Pesach. People are away, people out of town, different hours, and then we'll reassemble the Tuesday night after Pesach. Does that fit everybody? Everybody agree? Okay.
Yes.
So I wish everybody a Chag Kosher V'Sameach.
Kasher v'sameach, everybody.